before we get started, I'll just say there's something cruel about having a meeting the second day after daylight savings. So, but thank you guys for coming out. Well, the time is 7 p.m., so we'll call this meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee?
Here.
Trustee Delapenna?
Here.
Trustee Domke?
Here.
Trustee Forsythe?
Here.
Trustee Lanisa?
Here.
Trustee Burkowski?
Here.
And Trustee Trejo?
Here. All right, and we do have a quorum. I'd like to also ask the board to entertain a motion to admit Trustee Lanisa to participate to the board meeting virtual per our ordinance and in compliance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act.
Moved. Second.
Any discussion on this item? You received proper notice and it fits under the remote work or work obligation requirement. So can we have a roll call, please?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
No worries at all. So let the record reflect at 7:01, we have admitted Trustee Lanisa to participate virtually to the meeting at this time. With that being the case, do we have a motion to approve the prepared agenda as is?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. We'll continue on to Village Board public comment. Anyone wish to provide a comment on an agenda item may address the Village Board during the public comment or public hearing segments of the Village Board agenda. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to address the board at this time? Let the record reflect there's no one here. We'll continue on to new business to start our official presentation of the Village of Roselle proposed budget for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2026. And I'll have our village administrator, Jason Belowski, and our finance director, Tom Dahl, presenting tonight.
Thank you, Village Board, Mayor Pileski. So we're here tonight to formally present the proposed budget. Before we do that and before we get into the presentation, it's kind of the outline for tonight. In your packet was a scorecard, which kind of reflects some of the changes that were made to the budget. That's not reflected in kind of the posted budget. So kind of the most important, I think, is where we are starting with general fund right now, and kind of that difference of $250,000 is something that has evolved after additional staff work and conversations with trustees. If there's any questions about the scorecard, otherwise it was about other capital projects funds, water sewer replacement funds, to reflect some of the equipment you purchased this year. No material impact on anything we're going to be talking about tonight.
Any questions on the proposed budget scorecard version 1? Okay, let's jump into the meat and potatoes of it, if you will.
I'm going to try to advance this on my own, but we'll find that out. So for tonight, so really the budget does kind of require some difficult decisions by the board to maintain services and meet your strategic goals. We as the management team have adopted a strategic proactive approach that remains focused on organizational efficiency and effectiveness. And I appreciate all the hard work put in by the management team into the budget process over the last several months. Board support is critical to provide the resources necessary for sustaining operations, as the proposed budget relies on a mix of one-time and additional reoccurring revenues to address a structural imbalance in the general fund. So those are kind of my opening remarks. Now going through here, the budget approval process. Last week, you recommended approval of your 5-year CIP. This today is your first public hearing around the budget itself. Continuation on the 7th. Would like to, if we can leave today, knowing if we'll have a meeting on December 1st at 7 p.m. Would be helpful. And then otherwise, your next meeting for board or budget adoption would be December 8th. So for tonight's agenda, sorry, I advanced my own slide, but not that one. So we'll review your strategic priorities, kind of really what is the framework that staff follows in developing the budget. We'll go through the proposed budget, kind of all the funds, water, sewer, get into some additional conversation around property tax and alternate revenue options proposed in the budget, and then kind of wrap it up with some forward-looking items, and then go into the discussion. Throughout this presentation, any questions by the trustees? The mayor is willing to entertain those as I go through the presentation. Please let me know. So for strategic priorities, you have 5 of them. Kind of hit the highlights here. Fiscal stewardship. Here, the proposed budget reflects a 43%, nearly meeting your target of 45%. Some additional target of expanding existing general fund revenues is trying to be attempted through this budget. From a focused redevelopment, we have some active developments underway. Certainly Metro 19 coming on has helped immensely, and have some other active projects that will be sustained through this budget. But also some areas that we still have challenges of seeking some of that growth of sales tax outside of our TIFs. From a reliable infrastructure perspective, your $110 million 5-year CIP was recommended for approval last week. This budget itself reflects $26 million in water and wastewater investment in accordance with your master plans. You continue to pursue diverse funding strategies for all those improvements. From an operational sustainability, really this budget is kind of maintaining operations. So the employee training, continuing to pursue efficiencies through efficiency improvements through technology, while some of the capacity challenges are trying to still be discussed and addressed. Finally, it's the customer experience. There, it's leveraging technology, particularly cloud permit, and the continued implementation of that in our service delivery, and looking for opportunities to expand that or introduce additional technologies, increasing overall kind of digital or expanded digital services, events, and overall community engagement have been successful in last year, and looking to continue that into next year. So from a strategic priority, just kind of wanted to make sure we mentioned how we're touching on those throughout the budget process. From a general fund perspective then, these are the high line numbers, roughly between the 2025 adopted budget and the 2026 proposed budget, about $980,000 increase in expenses and revenues. There you can see the corresponding change in the fund balance from 45 to 43%. Some of the key takeaways from the 2025 budget estimate is overall, we're projecting a small surplus of about $52,000. Main contributors to that are savings due to vacancies and reduced contractual spending. We're also seeing some currently lower revenues from state shared state shared taxes and building and ambulance fees, some of our local fees. That's kind of the estimate year end for 2025. Now going into 2026 proposed budget, some of the key takeaways here is that it's really a maintenance budget, which to staff and us is no new expanded program or initiatives, no additional headcount. Expenditures are outpacing reoccurring revenue, which was kind of flagged through last year's budget process. That continues through this budget. As I previously noted about the roughly $980,000 increase is 4% over 2025. Much of that, 80%, is being driven by non-discretionary expenditures related to personnel, wages, insurance, and pensions. The budget does reflect utilizing ongoing home rule sales tax, which was approved as part of this year's budget, and also some additional revenue from property tax and new revenue growth that we'll expand on a little bit. The proposed budget does exceed PTEL by $250,000. It utilizes some one-time revenue that's available from interest income as well as from land proceeds that went into the parking lot operating budget. The additional revenue that I previously mentioned reflects an expansion of the amusement tax definition, increasing existing video gaming terminal fees, and revising upward our projected revenue next year associated with development and permit fees. It also reflects the continuing increase in the annual equipment replacement fund contribution that correlates with the very expensive vehicles that we're having to purchase and plan for purchasing in the future years. From a revenue standpoint, kind of looking back, and some of the changes in the general fund reflect overall revenue reductions of about 1.5 million and adding back some revenue through other funds and expansion, but certainly the bulk of the home rule sales tax has been targeted for infrastructure. So that's really not available to help some of the funding shortfalls in the general fund. From an expenditure standpoint, knowing that we're a person-focused organization and our people deliver the services to the community, the vast majority of our budget is personnel costs. In this last year, between 2025 and 2026, we're seeing significant increases, as many people are, in health insurance costs, but also public safety pension funds, particularly about 50% of the property tax revenue is now being devoted solely to public safety pensions, as well as IMRF pensions. So that really is the bulk of the year-over-year increase in this kind of maintenance budget is the contractual obligations related to the wages, the state mandates related to pensions, and health insurance to kind of mandated mandates there. So that's high level. Any questions before kind of getting into more of the operating department budgets and some of the key expenditures?
Any questions from the board? Seeing none at this time. Oh, sorry, trustee Trejo.
Since 2023, but like,
Oh, gotcha.
has it been like 200,000 or?
So my spreadsheet goes back to 2016, so it was 379,000 back in 2016.
And then generally just kind of.
It's just been, yeah. So in 2025, we have 250,000 budgeted.
And yeah, I believe we show a decrease or, okay. Does that answer your question, Lee?
It says 85,000 since 2023, but you're saying we budgeted under 50,000?
No, so the net decrease.
Okay, the net decrease. Okay.
Yeah. I didn't go back, obviously. The cumulative effect is certainly significant looking back to 2017.
Other questions at this time? All right, we can continue on.
So doing my best to highlight what I think are key fund expenditures, knowing that most other kind of expenditures in the budget are more of a maintenance and just ongoing. So some of these things that come up more infrequent. In the case of the elected officials budget, there's sort of a placeholder for Sister Cities visit. Their people reached out to us suggesting that they want to come out here next year. And I believe their attendance may be dependent on receiving some financial contribution from the village. So a number is in there, and that reflects the 15,000. There's 10,000 in there for some sort of strategic planning consultant to work with the board, as well as a lightning detection system for public safety, as previously kind of communicated by Chief Barreto. David, I think.
Oh, sorry, trustee Domke.
Who requested the money from Sister Cities?
David, do you?
Yeah, that was a conversation with the president of the Polish committee and the group that is organizing the visit. They asked if the village would contribute anything towards
Ask
it.
for a specific sum.
They did not ask for a
They
specific
just
sum.
Said, would you want to assist, right?
Correct.
So the sum came from us.
Correct. We had to put something in the budget. We still have not been able to meet to discuss that after numerous requests, so we had to put something for the budget.
Okay.
From a community relations standpoint, next year reflects increased costs for the July 3rd fireworks of about $7,000 relative to just the overall increase in the cost of fireworks. Otherwise, it's the same as event as 2025 next year, as well as some additional funding for marketing services. Within development engineering services reflects the elimination of the contractual health inspector. That cost of $7,000 is being reinvested into our code compliance inspector, who's able to complete those inspections and does do it in other communities currently. And so that's kind of a highlight within DES. Within the police department, there's some new equipment there that's that's included for replacement next year. From a Board and Fire Police Commission, there's just kind of some transparency to what all goes into that work. Looking to continue to try to hire police and fire. So there's 3 entry exams that are included. Promotional exams for a total of $33,000 related to police and fire hiring or promotional process. And then there in Public Works, just replacement of equipment relative to their operations and some planters in front of the first responders mural that we realize is sort of necessary to keep that safe. And then $100,000 related to your annual ongoing reforestation program. So those are the highlights of the general fund. I'll continue on to other funds.
Let's pause there real quick. Any questions on the general fund? I mean, we can always come back to things, but any questions? All right, let's continue on.
The tourism fund is funded through revenue from the hotel motel tax, which this year is a slight decrease from 2026 is a slight decrease from 2025. And overall there, the expenditures are related to our tourism bureau memberships, some additional spending related to the President's Cup 2026 next year at Medina, and then really the bulk of your special events come out of this fund, with almost half of that is Founder's Day. Within the IT fund, you'll see overall kind of the pressures being put on our organization through the increased cost in IT. Generally, most things have increased 5% across the board. We are reflecting one new fleet management solution there for electronically kind of monitor, tracking, repairs, fixes, also syncs up with part ordering. It's one of the, I don't want to say least efficient, but one of the areas that's ripest for efficiency. So that's how that one made it to the top of all of the requests when it came to new services or new software. Replacement of 2 existing firewalls, as well as a vehicle tablet replacement project in the fire department coming in around $59,000. More importantly, I think, is looking forward. We have a lot of anticipated costs that could be incurred within this fund that are slowly being evaluated, but are future decisions that will be before this board.
Any questions on these at this time? All right.
From your equipment replacement funds, you've really already approved most of this at your last board meeting, ordering vehicles for delivery next year, but there is still a code inspector vehicle as well as some fire extrication equipment that is included in this budget for next year. So that summarizes everything but water and sewer operating fund, which we'll be happy to go into unless there's questions about any of what's been presented.
Any questions on those funds? All right, seeing none, we can continue on to water and sewer.
Water sewer operating, reflects, reflects expenditures exceeding revenues, spending a little down in fund balance there, while still being right around at your target of 25% for fund balance. This too is what I would consider a maintenance budget. Not many new things, if anything, added to it. It's just reflecting the ongoing increased cost in providing the service. Dollar increase is reflected for water. As you know, we buy water through the DuPage Water Commission. So we're anticipating that rate going from the $5.80 up to $6.09. From a sewer side, corresponding increases there, 26 cents in DuPage and 14 cents in Cook. And then also going up to $9.25 in the CIS to align with, really you've seen this aligned with the expenditures through the CIP presentation. So to the median household consumption of 4,000 gallons, this would be roughly a $10 a month increase. Below that, I'm showing the kind of combined rates for DuPage and Cook, comparing them between 2025 and 2026. Some data certainly shows that our water rate, water only, is kind of almost below average when it comes to the rate. No two communities necessarily bundle their total rate package the same, but did just want to make sure that we highlighted where our rate stands up against a recent survey of other DuPage communities.
I also thought it was, oh, there we go, never mind.
Yeah, so from a consumption standpoint, here's a graph we generated to show that median consumption's that gold bar there. So just below 4,000 gallons is kind of the typical monthly household water usage. So on the left axis maybe is gallons, and on the right is kind of the average monthly bill amount. So you can kind of see generally where the bulk of our households land within usage and the corresponding monthly cost. Is there something else, David, you wanted to?
I would just say I always take it very seriously when people are concerned about the cost of their water bill, and it was very eye-opening that if you are over $200, you're really in the top 5% of water consumers in the village, being in the 95th percentile, and that even the 75th percentile, you're still below $150 a month for your bill. So this was very eye-opening about we don't have this gigantic consumption drain on our system and whatnot. So it framed it differently for myself, I know, so.
And it trends consumption's going down too, utilization's going down through efficiency and other things too, water conservation and other things too. So our expenses seem to rise, and the consumption and the number one funding of the water seems to decrease in consumption at least. So from a water sewer operating, kind of some of those key expenses that are in there, your two master plans are in there. You awarded those contracts this year. Those are underway. They will finish up next year. Some assessments and washing of the, and just ongoing maintenance for the water tanks, your continual annual smart water meter replacement. It's budgeted at $80,000 this year. The SCADA conversion to cellular was scheduled in 2025, but it wasn't completed, so it's rebudgeted for next year. And then the leak detection at $35,000. In the sewer operating, it's some equipment with employee lockers at Devlin and safety lighting for going into manholes. That's the operating. From a CIS. There is about $5 million that will come in next year. Kind of 1.7 is committed to debt payments, but those revenues are reflected in the CIP.
Any questions at this time?
So getting a little more into property tax now. PTEL, if we were non-home rule and subject to PTEL, property taxes could increase no more than kind of 2.9% in 2026. Currently, the proposed budget reflects that PTEL of 2.9, which is valued at $225,000. It's also moving the village's current limited tax bond levy, which was levied 10 years ago, but as non-home rule, without a referendum under state law in accordance with PTEL, to pay for capital. Instead of that going away, that's being reflected, staying on the tax bill, but just going towards the general corporate tax levy. and then an additional 250,000, sort of in excess of PTEL. So overall, that's a total increase of 5.43%, which is roughly $43.47 to assessed home at 365,000.
Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none.
Thank you. So specific to your PTEL limiting resolution that the board approved as part of its home rule referendum, it requires 2/3 of the board to approve any tax increase that exceeds PTEL. It also states that vote on that can't occur until there's discussions around the delivery of core services and if there's viable alternatives to increasing property tax. From a staff's perspective, certainly, as this is a maintenance budget, any reductions in expenditures we feel would be not maintaining and instead would be eroding or would reduce delivery of services. And certainly 75% of our budget is related to personnel costs. So most, if any of those expenditures are required, reductions in expenditures are required, we'd have to certainly consider 75 cents of every dollar is personnel.
It was 80. 80?
The number that's in this presentation relative to 80% is how much of the increase year over year, 2025 to 2026, is associated with personnel. But overall, our general fund budget is about 75% personnel. Just the increase year over year is more. And then, so kind of that's some discussion around what staff perceives would be the detrimental impact. The next slides will kind of talk on some of the alternative revenues that are available. And really looking at the year over year, general fund expenditure growth is kind of typically 3 to 4%. Can you move ahead, Brian? Thanks. So roughly about $1 million is, and the current revenue diversification is 31% property tax, 38% state shared, and 31% local taxes, fees, kind of everything else, including one-time revenues, which this budget has currently $387,000 in one-time revenue that may not be available every year. Reminder of kind of what your existing fund balance is at the 10.8 million. And looking to close that gap of that $250,000 that currently is reflected in property tax is, believe it to be the most reliable revenue source when it comes to trying to fix a structural imbalance and looking at the existing revenue diversification. So the revenues that are reflected in here are revenues that were considered but aren't necessarily reflected in here. From an expanded amusement tax that is reflected, as we'll discuss on another slide, expanding the definition of that as well as increasing the rate from 3 to 5%. A stormwater utility fee, which is a means to fund kind of the operation, maintenance, and capital of stormwater systems. There's plenty of expenses in the general fund that are related to stormwater. Those expenses could be removed, and would be funded through a separate fee. Otherwise, it's looking at just doing kind of across the board increases in any existing fees, taxes that you currently have, including the video gaming fees, which is recommended to be increased, and also utilization of additional home rule sales tax and general fund reserves are all revenue options. So with the $250,000 in lieu of increasing property tax by an additional $250,000, we're proposing the amusement tax increase from 3 to 5%, and then expand the definition to include streaming services and kind of other service-related amusements. Certainly over the years, things that were subject to the cable franchise fee, for example, and part of the reason that's decreased so much is people are cutting the cord of cable and have moved over to alternative platforms to get the same content that aren't subject to a tax. With the amusement tax redefinition, it would be. As more and more amusement historically amusement, you went to amusement, and now it kind of comes to you in many ways. And that's really the kind of the modification of the tax code to reflect kind of a different way that amusement's being delivered. So doing those two, increasing the rate from 3 to 5, as well as expanding the definition, is resulting in showing an additional $120,000 in revenue. Video gaming terminal fee, currently it's set at $250. That's the minimum, or that was the maximum, under state law as a non-home rule municipality. As a home rule, there is no cap. Provided some additional documentation to the board around kind of what other communities are doing. And $750 per terminal seems pretty in line with all the other kind of home rule communities around us that have the fee. And then also based on and that would increase revenue by about $50,000. And then building permit fees, as we're working through and getting further through the year, have a little more confidence around a couple development projects that could occur next year. That resulted in us increasing our permit fee line item up by $80,000. And other alternatives that weren't considered, at least by staff, were using additional home rule sales tax because of the commitment for that for capital, as well as your general fund reserves because it was already below your policy. So current property tax rates from nearby communities are reflected on this slide. What's reflected in the budget is the proposed tax rate of 0.7519. You can kind of see how that compares to other communities around here, ranging from 0.93 all the way up to 1.6. So that kind of captures the PTEL information. I can stop there before maybe my closing remarks.
Yeah, that'd be great. Trustee Trejo?
Just want to ask a couple questions about these property tax rates, though. The first is Glendale Heights, for example. It's my understanding that inside that 1.60, it includes the Park District levy as well, because I think they run the Park District as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't, other than looking at tax bills and pulling up rates. It's possible they have a municipal run park district, which is included in there, and that's not noted on this slide.
And then because like Bloomingdale and Carroll Stream don't have the IS or something analogous, it's probably fair to say that their higher rate is kind of using that money to offset what we have for CIS.
I can't answer that question. I don't know. I think to me, the big thing is no two towns are alike, and we as staff are challenged, one, to provide you with comparable data to use to support something, knowing that it's very, none of us know the policy decisions or the history behind some of the communities and why rates are what they are. Certainly Glendale Heights not having a park district, certainly if that could be something that's a little different since the other ones are reflecting total services, right? Knowing that a lot don't have fire departments and we do. So it's more for illustrative purposes, but yeah, we don't know specifically how capital improvement infrastructure that we fund with CIS is funded in these other communities.
Yeah, but to your point, I mean, because I took a look and just looked at the rate coupled with the water rates for these comparable communities, and it looks like Roselle is a little bit more than Bloomingdale and Carroll Stream, but Itasca and Hanover Park are considerably more than we are. And then Glendale Heights, inclusive of the Park District, is definitely a lot more. It's about $2,000 more in Glendale Heights. Once you factor in, like, I just used the Roselle Park District to take a look at their levy, then it narrows the gap, but we're still close to $1,500 less than Glendale Heights. So kind of ranges throughout the gamut, but 5,000 gallons of water costs a Roselle resident about $1,500 a year. Bloomingdale, it's $813. Carroll Stream's $881. Itasca is about $2,000. Hanover Park is about $1,300 for DuPage County side, and Glendale Heights is $2,500. They have a CIS and they also have debt service in their water bill. So,
Other questions or comments on the PTEL piece?
I mean,
Trustee Drew?
my only comment is I'm not supportive of going beyond PTEL. I would rather if we do adopt a streaming tax, which I'm still thinking about that as well, I would rather, since we don't really know where it's coming in, I would rather use general reserves to offset that, just to kind of see where the streaming is coming in, but.
Other comments or questions? Trustee Domke?
You have one. You had said that staffing is non-discretionary. Does that mean that we would say that we would not add any new staff in order to balance the budget? Because if it's non-discretionary, why would you add any staff when we already we're spending more than we're taking in?
The budget doesn't reflect any new staff. It reflects roles that have not been filled or are vacant currently, but it does not add any new staff roles.
Well, those roles could remain vacant then in order to save another additional amount of expenditures to make the budget, right?
Yeah, if the will of the board is to do a hiring freeze on all open positions, that's within the board's purview.
I would say a pause. I mean, the way I look at it now, this is a shock to me that we would be so in need of money. Inflation, as I saw it today, is supposed to be like maybe 2.6 next year, and then the following year, 2.4. So, and if we're growing our base at 3 or 4%, we're growing our expenditures faster than we could ever get our revenue, because people aren't making that much money. It's not the inflation bubble that we were working under before.
Yeah, if you would like to know the list of current vacant positions before deciding if we should do a hiring freeze, that's something staff can certainly provide to you too.
I think the one thing to keep in mind though is you do have overtime that we are accruing because of those vacant positions, and you also will have staff burnout as an effect too. And if those burnouts create them to move to departments that are fully staffed so they don't have to work overtime, then we're going to create more vacancies in the process too. So I think there's pros and cons to both ways that you look at it. But I think the fact that though there was needs out there, staff did not increase headcount to what it's been authorized at today speaks volumes that we would have seen additional costs included in here. But I do want to say, I think we're talking about a 250, 500,000, depending on the streaming side of it, gap. I think in the terms of our scale, that's not a huge gap. We've seen much further gaps, but I think this is a manageable gap that we can kind of work through today. So.
Well, and to that point, I would be against raising PTEL beyond the limit of what we had before we were home rule. Because why? Is because we did make a promise. We made a promise that we wouldn't do it unless we truly had to. And I don't see any justification yet as if we truly have to. I think would like to see some things that where we can economize. I do agree with the idea that if there's a fee that someone would pay for something they want to do, which is an option, a variable, that's a decent fee. But I would say taxing something, the Roselle residents are going to be hurting if the economy does go down. And then the last thing I would want to do is say, hey, by the way, while your economy's going down, we're going to tax you some more too. Especially when we said we wouldn't do it unless there was a major reason. I haven't seen a major reason. Now, if the government did something to us, Springfield did something, I could justify being the residents saying, yeah, we gotta shore it up. But I don't see that right now.
I would say DC is our biggest threat right now, to be quite honest. DC is our biggest risk of blowing a hole in our budget. So, but
Right, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm not gonna do it, raise a tax on a resident just because we're afraid of this DC.
other opinions from the board?
Till the end.
All right, we'll continue on.
So
Sorry, I don't check. I've done a poor job of checking on Cheryl. Cheryl, we can't hear you in the room though. Do you have any comments or questions at this
No,
point?
I'm good. I'm following. I'm all good.
I apologize. I didn't see your beautiful shining face on the screen that I forgot. So continue on, Jason.
And so these next two slides just kind of talk about some forward planning items. I think things that are certainly in our minds, I think, as we look at an annual budget. There are things that transcend our budget that we try to anticipate and predict. and have to be fluid in adjusting to. And one is certainly your strategic priorities and ensuring this budget is aligned with those. It's some of the unknowns that may be coming our way from the federal and state relative to any reductions in state shared revenues or federal funds, particularly those that flow through the state. We really won't know until next year and the state starts its budget process. You know, what our community composition is highly residential, don't have a lot of the commercial and industrial property tax or sales tax bases that maybe other communities do, which, you know, oftentimes results in needing to rely more on property tax because of that. Those forward-looking general operating projects that we have out there are large, and we haven't put as much effort into it to maybe refine those numbers, but particularly on the technology side, particularly if that remains a strategic priority of yours, which is to maximize technology in all of our areas, to limit adding staff, then we will need more. And apart from the one that's included in this budget, and there's major ones on really our ERP system, which would be a significant amount of money to go through that project. Some of the water sewer capital, you have your imposed CIS cap through your resolution 2. The budget for 2026 reflects $9.25, but you'll hit that cap in 2027. And depending on availability of other funding, that may prevent some challenges to accomplish all the projects that you may want to accomplish. The equipment replacement fund, you know, those just continually goes up in its annual contribution. And one thing not in there, which, you know, no, it's not known if municipalities will be required to fund the future replacement of public safety radios, but we know it will not be the ETSB who currently funds it. We know that. We don't know who's going to be responsible for funding, but if it ultimately falls back on municipalities, that easily is 7 figures capital expense that we don't currently budget for. Also, looking at the fire department, the facilities master plan, RFQ went out last week on that. But really the unknown costs that could be identified in that plan, particularly related to the fire department for any unbudgeted facility improvements. And then finally, just kind of that operational efficiency, service delivery, as I spoke about before, leveraging the technology and trying to enhance what we can do with what we have, and more. The people expect technology, both our customer, internal and external customers expect it, employees to be able to do their job, and ensuring we can invest in our workforce so that they can know how to use the technology and leverage it and deliver those services that you and the community expect. So with that, the management team here is available to answer any questions, get you data that you may need in advance of the next meeting, or to talk anything budget that you want to talk about.
All right. So floor is open for any discussion. Obviously, this is important. We need to get a few directions on some of the additional revenue options, whether we want to move forward with PTEL streaming, some of the terminal fees related to video gambling machines to help us set up future meetings. But it's also an opportunity to ask any questions of staff or things that you would like to get additional information for. You might not have an answer tonight. I want to stress that, but it sets us up for success then for the next subsequent meetings. And then at the end, I want to make sure we get a pulse on that December 1st meeting to make sure that the board has direction to move forward with that or not. So with that being the case, I'll open up first for questions on the floor just to make sure that people get the clarification, or that they can request the information they need to help them make the best decision. So any questions from anyone? Those may organically come up as we go through things, but I just want to make sure I give everyone that opportunity first and foremost. Trustee Trejo.
And I don't fully expect you to have the answer today, but this is probably more for Tom. But just looking at like the differences between the F25 and F21 budgets, we have a pretty significant increase in our compound annual growth rate for administration. Contractual is up 21.6%. Annualized basis, commodities up 36.1. In finance, personnel is up 14.8. Contractual is up 6.4. Community development, we're up 21.7% a year. contractual and commodities are both up about 13%. Commodities is pretty low amount of money. Police, we're up around 5% on all three. Fire, we're up on personnel a lot, down on contractual, mostly due to the shift in how we staff that. And then public works, we're up 3.2% CAGR with a 19% CAGR on contractual and 17.1% on commodities. So, and that's compound annual growth, not absolute percent changes. It would be helpful to see some of that data that's kind of like a variance analysis on what's driving some of those changes. And whether or not we need to start thinking about rebidding some of our contracts out, just given the huge increases that we're seeing in some of the contractual side.
So I can tell you, I didn't take away much from what you, that was a lot of information you
Yeah, that's
just
why I
shared.
like,
So,
and I could send it to you, but like,
yeah,
no, I just took a look at the budget from that we have adopted in 2021 and 2025.
okay, so your analysis was comparing the 2021 budget through to the 2025 budget. Okay.
And just looking at compound annual growth rates on personnel dollars, contractual dollars, and commodity dollars. And there's some that are, a lot of them are kind of like single digits, but there's some that are pretty heavy, like 21% a year, 13% a year. So just understanding like the drivers of those. Correct. Yeah. The budget, because we don't have 25 actuals. So it could be, if you have 25 actuals, a better, yeah. But comparing to, I did look at the 25 budget to actuals, and there's still a handful of double digits in there, especially community development, contractual on.
Yeah, I mean,
Administration.
we'll get you reasons why. Obviously, Community Development Department was a complete reorganization effective 2025. So the decreases would have been in the Public Works budget. So if this is something the board wants, this is a lot of work for
Yeah,
staff and just
that
want to
would
make
be-
sure.
Helpful for the entire board that would make a change on the decision for passing this budget? Or is this an exercise you want to go into more long-term focused?
And I would say even if it's just like a handful of the larger ones.
We prioritize like 3 or 5 of those that you're most concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I could.
Do you want this for the 10th? Then we'll try to get as much done as we can.
I don't know if the
right?
10th necessarily, I'm just trying to get like a line of sight into like what's going on to drive some of these really big swings in costs. I mean, when you're going up 20% a year over the years, every year, that's a pretty substantial growth relative to inflation, relative to anything, any metric that you're looking at. So again, like you said, there's some of it has been shifts in service, reorganizations of departments, and to me, it's not necessarily everything's non-discretionary. I mean, I think everything's discretionary. If the economy goes south and like sales tax plummets 50%, we're not just going to, I mean, I would hope that we wouldn't just increase property taxes like, $1.5 million to offset sales tax. So I think we need to do some of the due diligence, whether it's for this budget or the future. We need to have line of sight into what are some strategic decisions we might have to make down the road. I mean, this is a similar thing to 2008. I mean, no one wants to make cuts if we could avoid it, but like, I think we have to have line of sight into what that looks like.
So I think though what you highlight is not necessarily a budget activity for this year, in my mind at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is something that, you know, we are due for a strategic plan refresh, but I think in light of conversations we're having, it's probably best for us, instead of using that time to revisit our strategic plan, really look at more of the operations in more in depth and have a better appreciation of what's happening at that department level, to your point. And through that kind of deeper exploration, which we could do early next year, we can kind of realign on what are our service delivery expectations and what would that impact the budget for, if that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's why I said I think some of the nuggets, like the really big changes, I think would be helpful for this year. But I think the full analysis, I mean, I don't think you're going to be doing it due diligence if you try to get it done before December 10th, quite honestly. So, but I do think it's something that we need to start doing a little bit more heavy lifting on in the year to come.
So if you could put that in writing
Yeah, yeah.
for staff, that'd be great.
Definitely.
And then maybe prioritize a couple, and then we can give staff a chance to give you feedback as far as what they can do. And it sounds like it's not something that's needed for next week, but something that we could get maybe for December.
Like I said, the big rock. Yeah, exactly. Not next week, but
Okay.
some of the big rocks. Yeah.
Other questions? Trustee Domke?
I don't have the statistics like Lee does, but it's just, in my mind, if you invest in a lot of money in IT, shouldn't that make it easier for you to do more work with less people? I mean, I wouldn't buy any IT stuff if it wouldn't provide me with some big cost savings. In addition, I mean, I know service output is important, but you know, Roselle's still got the same 23,000 people they had 10 years ago, and they were doing it with paper and pencil. So I'm just saying, does the IT give us a chance to reduce our personnel? And if it doesn't, why
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Well, I'm not sure that's how, that's that the absolute statement that technology equals less people is not is not our position on technology. It's technology are tools that employees use to provide their services in a better, more efficient way. You can't replace police officers, I don't know, with,
Oh, no,
Peter?
I'm not getting at, I'm not
But-
talking about the,
but no,
talking about the people that are out there digging ditches, okay? I'm
okay.
talking about people who are running the establishment.
So
AI
us
is
in this
replacing
room?
people in private business. AI is going to replace people. We did robotics in my trade. That replaced people. The whole gig was that IT was going to lessen our employee costs.
I don't know if that's
Wayne,
the philosophy.
I run an AI division of our company. We do not use that to reduce headcount. We use that to help
No,
our
not
employees make
yet.
better decisions.
Not yet.
We can't. It's not effective at making a decision that we don't feel there's a liability risk that we're comfortable with. And we are a multi-billion-dollar company that doesn't want to deal with that. So I think there is some things, there's a lot of splashy headlines out there. AI is messy and it can be a powerful tool, but it needs to be groomed by people who understand what the outputs are. And I don't want to speak on behalf of our staff, but just because it's something that I literally do for my living right now, I don't think we've trained our staff on how to utilize AI appropriately to leverage the benefits of it. And frankly, government, we have not seen government adapt to AI because there's a lot of privacy concerns, especially with what we're doing. I'm speaking now for myself. I don't know if most of our residents would be comfortable with their personal data being put into an AI machine to do some of the stuff. So I
David,
just want to.
okay, I'll take the AI back. I know I'm just talking about it as the future, but I'll talk about specifically the present and the past. In my trade, it did replace people, and it has done that in manufacturing for years. So I'm just saying, different elements of IT can help you to do more work with one person instead of three. As it was with pencil and paper, you had to have three people. AI, IT, you only need one. I'm just asking. I know there's not an answer to this.
Well, I think I've provided one and whether you want, so I think from an IT perspective, you asked about cutting people with IT. I said
Yeah,
no.
we're gonna pay $500,000 for some IT stuff. What's it gonna do?
Well, one, we hope it will make our employees more efficient. We won't have to ask you for more employees. That's one option, right? It could defer the need for additional capacity
Jason,
to
I'm
meet
sorry. What are we doing so much more now than we were doing years ago?
relative to technology.
Relative to 23,000 people in Roselle?
Well, I know from our reports that we receive monthly, we have more call volume for police, for ambulance, and for fire service. We have more water main breaks on the street, more repairs that we're doing on the streets today. We have had a number of opportunities to reduce internal traffic to Village Hall, which we have turned down those opportunities from our reductions and other stuff like that to turn people online, but we have not taken those steps as a board. So we had a chance at doing that. I think, was it mid-year this year? Was it last year? I forget, but we had a chance to evaluate that. But I think, at least from a field-based perspective, we have a lot of good metrics. I haven't seen metrics on our internal traffic, but I know the board up to this point has not been willing to reconsider our operational hours for Village Hall being open for the public, as well as kind of the desk support that we do downstairs.
You can't lose sight of the fact that some of the money we spent on IT is because it's not supported anymore. After X amount of years, the companies don't support it.
Oh, yeah.
You have to upgrade it. It has nothing to do with how many people you can
So
have.
here, it's some new stuff we want.
It might be new because it's not supported.
And I think over the years, you've expanded GIS. We never had GIS before. We now have information at employees, particularly public works and engineering in the field that we never, pre-technology state, we never had. You never had electronic devices in front of you or electronic agendas delivered to you, which still takes staff to do, or iPads sitting back there for our next board fire, or for our other commissions and the staff necessary to maintain those devices, or the streaming of the meeting that we've never had to manage or do before. All of the expectations of the community to access our systems 24/7 is now Cloud Permit. It's now Munis Online. It's all increased cost of doing business to make our services more than anything available 24/7, right? Website, maintaining that content, pushing out, digital communications to the community on multiple times a day. We never used to do any of that, a decade or so ago, right? So you just think about everything we do and touch in society, there's a technology component behind it, right? Our squad cars and the equipment of Axon that they're all carrying, we didn't have a decade ago. And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, not only in the equipment, but then the infrastructure, the networks to support it, the firewalls, you name it. It's very difficult to provide a service nowadays that doesn't have a technology component to it, because we're delivering our services on cell phones, on computers. And so I think just society, and so for the for the increase in cost, that's why, it's driven by societal expectations, I believe, and all of our own expectations to have access to information when we want it and to do what we want to do when we have the time to do it. And I think we've been able to really absorb that as an organization and continue to provide those services with the headcount we do have. And I think that's because we are great at leveraging what we have, and we try to get every dollar out of all of the software we purchase and not just use a fraction of it, but it takes time and capacity and long-term problem solving, and much of our time is spent on sort of putting out the fires. And I think that's sometimes where we wish we could do more with technology, but we just don't have some of the capacity to do the longer visioning, planning around it.
Well, I appreciate your very well-structured answer, and it's true. But maybe there's some point where we just can't support continuing buying.
And I think that'll be discussions if the board wants to have kind of your updated priorities, then, I think that's the great opportunity for that.
Within our means. I look at it.
Other questions before we get into policy stuff? Cheryl, I see you.
Yeah, me, I
Yes.
would like to, do you happen to know on, Jason or Tom, on the Microsoft licensing? It used to be that we'd get a computer, you'd get a Microsoft license, and you'd keep it for several years before we had to actually update it. You can't do that any longer. You are upgrading Microsoft licenses every single year. Do you know what, I'm not saying you're going to know it right this instant, but can you tell us what of that 500,000 is that reoccurring cost for those Microsoft licenses?
Yeah, we can tell you how much we have budgeted, and that's a great point. Certainly, the software and technology industry has forced us to accept much of this increase, regardless of how we operate.
We could use Linux, right?
Google Sheets.
I just know when I saw it, when we paid the bills on that this year, that I was quite interested in seeing how much that was, because it did seem to be a large reoccurring sum.
So our reoccurring annual Microsoft licensing is about $40,000 a year.
Okay, I thought it was even higher than that.
Other questions before we jump into some of the policy decisions? And obviously, questions can come up organically. It's not like you've got one shot at it, but I just want to do this in some structured chaos, if you will. I kind of want to work backwards because I think some of the alternative revenue kind of informs or reinforces the conversation on PTEL. So I would like to start with the streaming proposition first and foremost. So there's the expansion of the amusement tax to include online amusement / streaming services and whatnot, and the rate increase of 3% to 5%. I know Trustee Trejo, you had mentioned you're kind of on the fence on it. Other trustees want to hear your thoughts or your pulse on that issue if you're at that point yet.
I'm good to go on that one.
I'm good to go on that one.
Yes from Trustee Della Penna, yes from Trustee Forsythe, Trustee Domke.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to increase anybody's fees, but that's one where it's a usage and it's voluntary. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Trustee Lanisa.
I'm good on that one. I say yes.
I'll catch Trustee Perkowski when he comes back in, but Trustee Trejo.
Yeah, the only thing I would say on the streaming tax, I know I talked to Jason maybe like a week ago or so, but I was just waiting to kind of see like what it covers, what it doesn't cover. And like, I know you were doing some research with the Arlington Heights, and it's fine if you don't have it yet, but like, that would just be the thing I would want to see before I like make the final call.
Yeah, and
But I'm leaning towards like, again, the cable franchise tax. It's something you can control. If you don't want to pay it, you could cancel Netflix. To me, it's very different than a property tax or rain tax. So there, I would say I'd be more open to it, but
yeah, we can try to get a revised draft ordinance, but I can tell you that it's going to be up to the provider to figure out the applicability of our tax to their service. We may reference bundled, and if you bundle some of these things, then you need to tax it based on how you
perceive the value.
perceive it to be as a retailer or whatever. That's the language I've seen. We set the law, we don't necessarily set the guidance or the interpretation of it. But that's kind of what we've seen out there so far.
So the example that we talked about, like Amazon Prime, like Amazon would determine what their streaming
Yeah.
portion of their Amazon.
If at all, or if it's more going to come through their individual downloads and their,
Yeah. So that would be clear, but the
right.
little fuzziness would be like the family plan or something where we were saying like, yeah, we don't know how that would.
They do that now, because cable does that. It's all based on what they perceive as what's cable, what's your internet, so if you bundle all those,
Yeah.
they set that. And actually in the ordinance, it references Illinois state law that if the tax is applicable, if sales tax is applicable, then the streaming tax is not. So there is a reference to state law on how they should interpret that.
Okay.
Trustee Perkowski, we were just going around the horn on the streaming tax and favorability to that or not. What is your position on the streaming or the expansion of the amusement tax?
Yeah, thanks. I should call it.
100% in favor. It makes sense. It does not even seem like a new tax. It seems like just a reconfiguration of an old tax. The analogy I would use is that it's like as if we had a typewriter tax and now we have a computer tax. So I do not view it as any real change to our current operations, just capturing the new form of the same revenue stream.
So I'd say from that perspective, I'm going to call it 5.5 you've got. So I think that's enough information to kind of move forward with that assumption in the budget. And then we can work on getting some additional information available to the board as a report. I think also for those at home, when it was a different playing field, everyone was paying their fair share through the cable tax, even Blockbuster when it still existed up there on Plum Grove Road, or not Plum Grove Road, sorry, Nerky, Roselle Road, like we were getting amusement tax from video rentals there. That game has changed so dramatically and it's all digital. And I think this is more leveling the playing field. It's not fair for a brick and mortar business to be taxed and a online business not to be taxed. So I see this as really leveling the playing field and supporting those that are actually, physically present to have the same kind of opportunity to be taxed as an online provider that can kind of escape that. So I think that's an important thing, frankly, in my mind. So I think that helps obviously reduce some of the balance that's out there. The increase in the video gambling terminal tax, we have it set at the prior maximum cap at $250. Staff has proposed raising that to $750 to match neighboring communities. That tax is also split between the operator and the establishment, so it is something that has split costs. Since I started over here, I'll be fair and go this way. I just want to get everyone's perspective on their openness or not to that one. So Trustee Perkowski.
Also, in favor. The fact that so many of these establishments are so desperate to get them shows that they will be able to cover this cost, especially considering that they're already paying it in almost every other town where they have it. So I'm in favor.
Trustee Trejo.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Trustee Domke.
Well, see, ask me again.
Trustee Domke.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
I'm in favor.
I am too.
Cheryl.
I'm in favor.
All right. You got 6 on that one, so we'll include that then in the budget. With those 2 things being kind of called out, I think that brings us to the PTEL. I know there's been a lot of conversation around that one as well. I want to start it from the backwards end, so I assume no one, I'm going to make some assumptions here. And I'm going to just ask for affirmation before I get to that. But are we okay with the 2.9% rate increase that is based on the inflation numbers that dictate PTEL and rolling the bonds that are rolling off that we would reissue anyway into our property taxes. That's something that everyone has alignment on. If not, I'll break those out in individual conversations. So is that agreement on those two? So there's the 2.9% PTEL increase, and then the bonds that we issue through property taxes that are rolling off, that those would be reissued but put towards the general revenue instead of what they were before. So is there alignment on those two items?
To do it if we were not home rule.
Correct, we would reissue bonds with that money. The only thing is it gives us the flexibility, if we were not home rule, that would have to go to infrastructure. So it'd have to go to roads or something else. Now we can use that money, actually go towards general revenue,
No new tax or.
but we have the freedom to put it to where we need it, and right now we need it in general
One of
revenue.
the features that gave us is that we could unsilo some of the money.
100%. So we've got alignment from everyone on those two.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not totally aligned, but.
Okay. Okay, well, that's something we could do no matter what without this authority. So we have plenty of money. I mean, so, okay, so we got 5 in favor of that one. So then moving on to the PTEL, or the additional 250,000. Cheryl, I'll start with you. So since you're not here, I can't pick on you.
I,
That's
I was actually gonna say the same.
kind of insignificant, I think, at the end of the day with this one. But Cheryl, if you want to start on the additional 250 above.
above the, are you talking about the reserve, moving money from the reserve
Okay,
right
I
now?
mean,
or-
the option is either to utilize reserves, find other means, or to levy that additional 250.
So I am in favor of using reserves at this point. I would like to see, us focus in the future about seeing what costs we can, possibly curtail. And in the meantime, though, I do not want to go into the residents' pockets any deeper, and I would like to utilize reserve.
Okay, trustee Delpana.
I agree, but I second what Cheryl said. I think right after the first of the year, we should start looking at 2027 budget and analyze things like Lee brought up, but let's not wait till November to do that.
Yes.
Trustee Forsythe.
I would have to agree with them and everything that they said.
Great. Trustee Domke.
I would use the reserves, but I would still look for some ways to cut the expense before we figure out how much reserves.
Okay.
Any other way to cut the expense.
Okay. Trustee Trejo.
Yeah, like I said earlier, like I would rather look at the reserves, especially if we do the streaming tax, which it sounds like we will. So, at mid-year budget, I mean, it could perform 2 or 3 times what we expect. We have no idea. So like we might not even need to dip into reserves at the end of the day. And I'd much rather have that.
We'll get that Trader Joe's.
Yeah. I'd much rather have that than just adding another property tax or a higher property tax that is permanent. I would much rather say, okay, we have the streaming tax. We budgeted X amount and at Y, and it's a lot higher than we thought it was, or even flex the rate up. And that I would much rather do that then.
Trustee Prokowski.
I would be in favor of scrapping the PTEL resolution. I was not in favor of that to begin with. I understand we made that promise, but I just feel like with the uncertainty that we're facing, the projects that we're facing, we need to be honest with the residents that if we're running a maintenance budget as it is, the harmful effects are worse than a slight property tax increase. Because I do just think, how much delay in the roads being plowed. I don't like to be personal, but a couple of years ago, my mom had a widowmaker heart attack. Would I have been comforted that our taxes were a little bit lower if a short-staffed fire department hadn't gotten there in time? So for me, I know we're not going to do it this year because I'm very much so in the minority on that, but I do think that we just need to be honest with the residents that for us to be able to do what we need to do, we have to accept that there's going to be some painful decisions, and we're the residents too. So we're going to be affected by this. I think I might actually be the least well-off person sitting up here as well. So it's not as if, I'm just some rich guy throwing that around. So anyway, sorry.
So we've got 5 in favor of going with the reserves and 1 with the 250. So I think we'll, if we can make that update to reflect the reserves then being utilized to balance it from that side of things, I think the point has been well made across the board in different ways and whatnot. I think next year's strategic planning, we can probably, and I think, Wayne, to your point, I think like there's a number of things in there. We always budget conservatively, and I think that's to our benefit. And so I know as we were going through things, there's about $80,000. I'm like, yeah, we could probably fudge some of those numbers around, right? But that's just my ledger over here. I think it's difficult to do armchair quarterbacking at this stage in the game to kind of pick and choose what we want to cut or remove. It can be done, and I'm happy to go through that if we'd like to. But I think we can leverage the time that we would have used for strategic planning, and we could also save 10 grand instead of hiring a consultant, just meeting as a group and getting a little bit more into the weeds of operations and understanding. I think what Jason started off the meeting with and the presentation with, the budget's a reflection of our strategic plan. And if we're saying we're not comfortable with what this budget is presented to us, that means we're not comfortable with our strategic plan anymore. And I think we as a board owe it to ourselves and to staff then to go back in and understand what are we willing to negotiate and change on? Because I think staff has made a good faith effort to deliver on what we said our priorities were. If our priorities have changed or we have different things that we want to pursue as opposed to what we decided to back in 2022, which is very, very fair and honest, then we need to be comfortable in understanding what that framework is, so staff has the right direction to make those decisions and to come to us with options. So I think those two kind of all come hand to hand is, I guess, something that I would say. But as far as to circle back to the additional permit fees, and those permit fees, I would just want to make sure I don't state this incorrectly. It's not necessarily an increase in the fees itself, but more so the anticipated projects that we expect to go through, which means this board could not waive those permit fees when that developer comes to us or asks for that. Are we comfortable with that being included in the budget from that side? So Trustee Trejo.
I'm good with it, but even beyond that, I think we should, and this may or may not be for the budget, but I think given the increase in IT and the efficiency that it drives and the customer service that it delivers on, I mean, I think we should start looking at increasing fees for building permits. Like, if we have a fee that's the same from, let's just year over year even, I mean, I think we need to adjust these fees more often. I mean, I'll get a driveway, let's say every whatever, 10 years. If I paid $75 for a fee and now it's $200, it is what it is. If that's what it costs for an inspector to come out, for the village to process it, to give me the service that I want, and I'm expecting to get delivered, I think that should be included in it. I don't think it's fair to everybody else that, isn't using those services per se in a given year to, pay for other ways.
I would just add, I think, and that's a well-made point, I think there's a lot of just fees in general on the books that we probably need to revisit the frequency of and how those apply and whatnot, because I think there's a lot of things that we probably can be more on par with our neighbors on. We'll put it that way.
I mean, even like a fence fee, I paid a fee for a fence. I mean, I got one new fence since I've lived here in 2007 at my house, and I wouldn't have cared really if it was double. If I had an inspector that came that was good, that I could be reassured that it was a good job, and I had cloud permit and I had a really good customer service experience, then it's good. The old customer experience, which we all know, wasn't as great. So to me, it's like if I'm paying a pretty, call it substantial fee, I'm going to be probably more annoyed with. But if I'm getting my answers like very quick, then it's like, okay, I'm getting answers. Like even don't know why I was copied on this email, but Karen Bricks got an email about a flower shop and she was very quick to get responses back to the person. So if people are feeling that they're getting that service.
Talking my language now, and I want to know about this flower shop.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm like, that's great. But no, I'm just saying that, like, I feel like if, we're spending the money on the IT, we should have sort of a user fee to offset some of that, especially if it's delivering a better experience.
So yes, in favor of it and wanting just to evaluate fees in a more broader sense.
Correct.
Trustee Domke,
So as a person who actually got a building fee this year,
were they enough?
what's that?
Were they enough? Do we need to go back and charge you more?
Honestly, I got more for my money than I would have expected because the village
wanna pay more.
came out. They kept me on task. They kept my builder on task. They gave me ideas that were necessary to save me money in the future so I didn't have to rework anything. And so I would have paid even more of the fee.
We'll send you an invoice tomorrow.
Send a check.
250,000.
You got to approve the budget.
I don't approve budgets here.
So
But you were in favor of the 80,000, but you second his notion.
of making the fees, commensurate with the service you're providing.
So trustee Forsythe, just on the notion of the 80,000, including that for or anticipated projects coming in, you're fine including that in the budget. Do you have any feelings on revisiting fees for services and stuff like that?
Yeah, we could look into it.
Okay, trustee Delpena,
Yes, but I'd wait till next year to revisit looking at the fees.
trustee
Nothing
Lenise.
to do
Yeah.
into this budget, yes.
Trustee Lenisa.
Yes, I'm all about revisiting it, but I also think we need to take care of this, this budget now and then after the first of the year.
And then trustee Kirkhouse. I'm trying to mix up who's starting where and not being too biased here.
I'm in agreement with trustee Trejo.
Okay. So we've got the alignment on that one, and I think we don't go chase that one, but we'll talk more about it. Are there other, I want to pause there. I know there's been a lot of conversation. Any questions from the board or things or notions that we haven't covered here that we want to discuss or dive a little bit deeper in or get staff ready to bring back to us more on? Is there anything that staff has questions on that we have not addressed or we have not been as clear on as far as providing direction on based on the budget presentation tonight?
No, I think we got answers to all the questions and direction necessary.
Okay, so we will, is it fair to assume that at next week's meeting, we'll have an updated budget scorecard that will reflect some of this feedback here? And then we'll kind of play it by ear. I don't want to hold anyone to a firm deadline on this one, but December 8th is the firm deadline. As far as information we can gather, as far as the impact of an expanded amusement tax and maybe providing some information from other communities to help baseline that if possible. And then definitely on the outstretcher, providing some initial thoughts or feedback on trustee Trejo's prioritized list, I'll put it, for some of the changes since 2021 and some of the root cause analysis there.
Yeah, we'll get to work on that, share it with the board when it's ready, and I'm sure some stuff will stand out pretty quickly why, but until we.
Yeah, I think oftentimes when we look at the numbers, we can fill in the gaps without the information ourselves. And so I think shedding light on what's going on, it will probably highlight some really interesting examples that really make you go, huh, about some of the things that we do as an operation and some of the challenges we've had. So I'm looking forward to those. I'll also work with staff then to kind of put together a framework that we can get feedback from the board as far as for us reconvening in Jan 1 of 2026 on how we want to shape this conversation. So that way, I think that's tied very intimately to this budget conversation. I think this isn't a pass it and we're going to just move on and pat ourselves on the back. So I want to have some accountability, make sure that the board, since we had, I think, a very productive conversation here tonight, we have the ability to kind of talk about the items that we're concerned about or want to kind of focus on in that kind of, we'll call it a strategic session-ish process. So before I move on, I know there's a number of outstanding items that will be coming up on the agendas. So we wanted to get the board's opinion on the availability and interest in having an additional meeting on December 1st. So traditionally, we've used that if we had spillover from the budget. Based on our conversations right now, depending on how next week goes, I don't know if we will need to have an additional budget meeting before we approve it on the 8th. However, with that being said, I think we do know we have a number of projects from a development standpoint and others we don't want to delay that. So that would make for a very lengthy meeting on the 8th, which if this board would rather have a long meeting on the 8th, that's totally fine. Or we could move some of those things to the 1st, get through some of our typical regular agenda type items. So that way the 8th, it would still be a somewhat meaty agenda, but it wouldn't be as long. So want to get the board's pulse on your interest in having a December 1st board meeting. I'll start with you, trustee Domke.
I'm ready, whatever.
Okay. Trustee Forsythe?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Or either way.
Okay. Cheryl?
I'm good with the first and the 8th, yes.
Okay. Trustee Prokowski?
Yes.
Trustee Trejo? Okay. All right. Then we'll get some of those sample stuff out there to the board and we'll finalize that. But I think sounds like we're moving forward with the December 1st, which I personally think is the best thing. Otherwise, it's going to be a very long night on the 8th, which is a good thing. We've got a lot of things to prove. So, let me just get back to the agenda real quick here. Sorry. Is there any other business for discussion only from the board tonight? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any abstentions? Meeting is adjourned at 8:19. Thank you so much. Good to
Thank
see you.
you.